Thanks for joining us for our first ever weather podcast. My name is Garrett Lewis alongside meteorologist Joe Pennington. Today we're joined with Wayne Johnson. Wayne's a dear friend for years with weather. Talking a lot about severe weather today. We're going to be talking about Skywarn, storm spotting, and everything else.
Yeah, it's and of course Wayne goes back a long time in the area with the Skywarn spotters on ham radio, and of course if you've listened on the scanner or got your ham radio license like us and participated in the Skywarn net, of course you've heard Wayne on a lot of times during severe weather with the severe weather net in the Fort Smith area on 146.640 is the local repeater. So Wayne, why don't you tell us a little bit, some people are familiar with what you do, tell us a little bit about what you do, when you got into it, and what you guys are doing in the area now.
Okay, I can go back when the Greenwood tornado happened. A good friend of mine lived down at Greenwood. Luckily enough, they wasn't hit directly, but they were some damage. That's before I even had my ham license, and I seen all the destruction that happened. And I knew the weather service out there didn't have any kind of system set up to, other than just issuing bulletins, so I decided to get my ham license, and I read it in some magazines where they could set up a Skywarn weather net to go out and set up the net and have spotters out to report to the weather service, which would help them issue more warnings and watches and stuff whenever there's severe weather in the area.
And that was in the Greenwood tornado in 1968. So
right.
In 1968, there wasn't a severe weather Skywarn network with ham radio spotters at that time.
In fact, we didn't have any repeaters around here, but in a couple years later, we set up a repeater on Kavanaugh Mountain, and that have a good coverage area for all of our spotters, not only here in Fort Smith, but surrounding areas, about an 80-mile radius of Fort Smith.
So when I guess it was the early 70s when you guys got going with the local Skywarn crew?
Yes, and actually, I think of 1975 when I started.
Oh wow!
Wow.
So
there was no Skywarn before that. So how hard was it to get? I mean, did it grow slowly? Did it grow fast?
It grew slowly, and then once they seen how it worked, it just really bubbled up into more hams getting their license, and even today, there's always new people that want to get their ham license just to be able to go out and spot severe weather. Now I want to get one thing straight, that we've got spotters, and then you got these guys that go out and take pictures, and you've seen it on TV here lately where that's what they do. Once they get into an area where there's tornadoes and stuff like that, they don't report that to the weather service. They just film it or take pictures of it. That's it. Right. And what our guys do is go out. I can send them out to an area where, while looking on radar, say, hey, this area right over here looks like the potential for some severe weather, and they go to that area in their cars and report back what they're seeing, and we report that to the Tulsa Weather Office.
Well, tell us about a typical day for you guys. Say we're in the middle of spring, say you got a severe weather set up. That day, what are you guys doing? You're obviously looking at the weather earlier that day, getting everything organized. Kind of walk us through your day. Okay,
usually here recently they set up what they call a webinar. That the weather service looks ahead of time and sees what may be happening, and they send out a little bulletin and say, hey, tomorrow looks like it's going to be a bad severe weather. And they set up a webinar, which is you call a telephone number in and also get on the internet, and the local official there at the weather office in Tulsa shows you charts and things what they think may happen the next day, and that gets us prepared to set up our net ahead of time and let our guys know that, hey, tomorrow looks like it's going to be a bad day, and all of you that can stand by, and we'll keep monitoring the weather, see what happens.
And a lot of these guys too are, I mean, these guys have jobs and stuff like that. So a lot of times a Skywarn spotter would have to take time away from work. Say if it was in the middle of the afternoon, take time off and go out in the field.
Yeah, that happens quite a bit. There's a lot of guys that are delivery people or go out and inspect stuff, insurance adjusters, doctors and lawyers. And we even have people coming through on Interstate 40, for instance, that are ham operators, and a lot of them know about Skywarn weather nets, and if they run into weather, they get on our repeater and let us know too. So there's all kinds of different ways of getting that information both ways.
What are some big successes that you've seen since you started doing this as far as ham radio and being able to, of course, you know, Doppler radar wasn't even put in Fort Smith until the mid-90s. So prior to that, you guys were pretty much the only eyes of anything because you're sampling such a high part of the atmosphere from the Tulsa radar and Little Rock radar. What are some of the successes you've seen both before we got Doppler in Fort Smith and after?
Well, they're like night and day.
Yeah.
The old radar system could not, basically all they could do, you could see maybe a hook echo on radar, but it wasn't very pronounced. And the only thing other than that, you can see the tops of a thunderstorm, and also maybe you can see some hail shafts coming down or hail coming out of it. But as far as actually thinking that there was a tornado, it's hard to detect. But with the newer radar systems that they've got out now, thank goodness they put it here close by. They were planning on putting it about 60 miles south of here, and that back in the mountains area, and this area, by moving it up to here, it made a world difference.
Well, tell us a little bit about the history of the area, because you know, you started the net back in the 70s.
Right.
Big changes have come about. There was a National Weather Service office in Fort Smith for a time before it was decommissioned. Then everything got switched over, split up between Tulsa and Little Rock in the eastern parts of the area. So talk to us a little bit about the early days, what's changed. Of course, the technology's changed. You talk about going from the early 70s to now where you have webinars on the internet.
Yeah.
So let's
well,
change.
back then, the local weather officials they would kind of monitor what was happening ahead of time too, and I used to work at Whirlpool, and during the daytime, if they seen or thought there may be some bad severe weather moving into the area, they would call me at work, and I would be able to leave work and go out there and set up our weather net during the daytime. It not only helped the community, but it also helped Whirlpool, because there's a lot of folks out there working, and if there's a tornado hit close by, they could go to shelters real quick like. And they had it set up to where we could call them real quick too.
And then tell us about the transition when Fort Smith, the Weather Service in Fort Smith got decommissioned. It was at the airport back in the day, and then the transition over to the Weather Service in Tulsa, and you guys' working relationship with Tulsa.
Oh, at first it was kind of sketchy, but once we got it, you know, they had a big fuss over the not warning on the 96 tornado and that sort of thing. I knew back then that it was a rough go, because they hadn't had that radar up too long on one in Tulsa. And that's 120 miles from here also, and that's what worried us more than anything, scaring about that coverage of that new radar. We was on the outer edge of the radars as far as detecting severe weather, so we was pushing real hard to get a radar in our area over here.
Well, tell us a little bit. And we were both younger at the time, but both watching that night, I'm sure, on Channel 5, April 21st, 1996. Kind of what prompted my interest in weather. Tell us a little bit about that day.
Yeah, what happened that day?
Oh, well, that afternoon, the office here in Fort Smith could not issue watches, warnings, or anything, because the radar at that time was decommissioned because of the new radar in Tulsa.
Who all was there? Was it just Forrest? That was
no, Warren Hadley was in charge.
Okay.
He was the one there at that time. He was the only one there, and me, of course. And he had been watching all afternoon these storms moving in from the southwest around the McAllister and that area. And he said they've been dropping tornadoes in and out all afternoon. And he said, you might want to come out and set up the weather net ahead of time and get things set up. And sure enough, we was watching it on what we could tell on the radar, and it looked real bad. And of course, Warren's been there for years, and he knew exactly from the old radar what it looked like. And he was able to get a hold of some folks and let them know ahead of time that, hey, this looks pretty bad. Y'all might want to issue something more than just a thunderstorm. And a little bit after that evening, we had our weather net up and going, and one of our spotters went out to Tri-State Speedway out there and set up on that ridge, and he was looking back over toward the northeast, and he could see a funnel starting to develop. And he hollered at me on the radio, and I relayed to Tulsa Weather that one of our spotters had seen a funnel cloud coming down and thought maybe it's going to hit in Fort Smith. In the meantime, we relayed that information to Tulsa Weather, but at that time, their radar, I have to admit, their radar was new, and they had some programming issues. But anyway, they thought it wasn't going to develop into a tornado, and it was going to be a thunderstorm, so they issued a thunderstorm warning instead of a tornado. And of course, about 5 to 7 minutes after that happened, it hit downtown Fort Smith.
So the spotter actually had eyes on the tornado before it hit.
Right, yes.
Which I guess is the whole role of Skywarn and the WeatherNet.
Right, but now that has changed, because sure as any of the spotters out, if we relay the spotters got a tornado on the ground, and they just got a warning out, but watch out, but not a warning, we can relay that information to them, and they can immediately issue a tornado warning.
What about, like, as far as just the basics of it? Basically, how does the WeatherNet work? Do you basically take over the repeater during severe weather?
Yes, the repeater, I guess, is what it sounds means. It's set up on a mountaintop, and radios, ham radio operators in their cars or in their houses, either one, sends a signal up to it, and it repeats it out into a bigger area. And when that happens, I'll go out to, now it's at the Emergency Office Service here in Fort Smith, and set up take over the repeater and set up a weather net. I ask for check-ins. These guys check in from all over the area, and I know where they're at when they check in. I write it down, and then whenever there's a bad a sale somewhere, well, I can holler just at that one guy. Everybody else keeps their mouth shut, don't say anything until they know that it's clear to report what they're seeing.
How much do you get driven crazy by people who leave their mics open or report things that you don't have to ask, right?
Don't ask. Beep, beep, beep.
Yeah. Well, seriously, I guess when the Skywarn spotters are out there, what advice, if someone wants to be a weather spotter, they first of all, they need to get their ham ticket, right? Their ham radio license, which consists of taking a test,
right,
and then get a ham radio, obviously, and learn how to use it so you don't fry yourself, you know.
And it's not that hard anymore. The code has gone away. It used to be you had to have Morse code in order to get your license, but nowadays you don't have to have the code because it's not recognized anymore. You could get on the internet, and there's several locations on the internet where you can get study guide material, and you can take sample questions, and there's 500 questions in a pool, but you only have to pass, there's only 35 questions to the for the technician license, and you get what is it, 28, you only can miss 9 out of 35 and still pass, so it's not that hard.
And once they get that, would you suggest they go to one of the spotter trainings?
Yes. If they don't, well, I've got material that I can get them, or we can get some from the Tulsa Weather Office. And we only have the classes once a year, and we're having one coming up February the 4th of this year at the new Emergency Office Service at where it used to be the Armory out at 8500 Zero Street.
Okay, yeah. So talk a little bit about what's happening on the 4th of February. What are you guys going to be doing there?
Well, we have the Weather Service has a guy just strictly dedicated to giving spotter classes all over this part of Oklahoma and northwest Arkansas, and he comes over and gives about an hour and a half, 2-hour class explaining what is happening as far as new technology and what the general things you need to look for when there is severe weather out there, and what you can see as far as tornadoes and how they are formed and the whole 9 yards. He does a real good job, and of course he has a question and answer session too.
It's all free too. Anybody can
yes, anybody is welcome to come to it. It's the new Office of Emergency Service and the Public Safety for Sebastian County, and I think the police department also has some facilities out there, training facilities that they're using that building for also.
And last year, it was held out at the, of course the facility wasn't done out there on Zero Street, but it was a packed house last year when it came down. And you learn a lot at these classes. I mean, it's about, like you say, an hour and a half or 2 hours, but you'll leave there with a pretty good understanding of what you're going to look for. And again, there's you talked about it earlier, a big difference between the storm chasers like you see on TV who are doing it sometimes for the adrenaline rush of being out there, and the storm spotters. Right.
Yeah, it makes a world of difference when they can go to the classes and understand what's happening, how the weather forms, how the tornadoes form, and that sort of thing. But there is times in between classes that we have new hams come along, and like I say, they have plenty of material. You can get on the internet and look at what to look for on tornadoes and that sort of thing on the weather webpage.
What's some of your most memorable weather events here? You talked about the 68 Greenwood tornado in 96.
And anything 96, else 2000 ice storm. Even though we're not talking about severe, that's severe weather too in another form.
Well, I saw the DVD from that you dropped off a couple years ago. What was that like? Basically, the ice storm, it messed up, it just iced over the repeater, which is on Kavanaugh Hill in Poto, right?
Well, no, it didn't really mess it up. It messed up the one on Poto Mountain.
Okay.
That was the one at the Sheriff's Department and the EMS, and that also cell
kind
tower.
Of important, right?
Cell tower was frozen up too, and there was no electricity up there. So they had to go up and see if they could get the generator up there to fire up the transmitters for the Sheriff's Department and the EMS. In the meantime, it was down for about 2 days, and there was no communications whatsoever as far as cell phones or police department or Sheriff's Department and also the EMS. So our guys got out and volunteered to go ride with the Sheriff's Department and even some of the ambulances and ride with them. When they got a call here in Fort Smith, they could go by ham radio to the different vehicles like the Sheriff's Department cars or the ambulance and send them out on these calls.
Wow. So ham radio played a huge role in the ice storm then. Yeah.
In fact, our judge was nice enough to give us a plaque for that effort we did. We spent about a week or week and a half doing that kind of public service for communications.
That's great. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. I didn't know it was that. I thought maybe it was. I'd seen some of the pictures of the hill and just trying to get up it and seeing all the trees that were.
Yeah, you can ask one of your buddies about going up. They decided they was going to go up that night and get the generator up there, and he hollered at me on the ham radio, Dave Whitus, and asked me if said about an hour and a half we'll holler back at you when we get on top. And 6 o'clock the next morning he hollered at me.
I guarantee it.
They had rough going of it. The National Guard had to get some Humvees up there, and they had to get a DC-9 to get up there to the repeater because the trees were down all over the roads.
Wow.
Wow. Talk to us a little bit about, too, the process you go, the local Skywarns on the 6.4, the 146.640, then you relay it on what's called the 440 repeater to Tulsa, correct?
Yeah, there's 2 different ways. There's actually 3 different ways now. We can do it, we relay it on a UHF link, which is on Kavanaugh Mountain, and also there's one on Mount Magazine, and if that don't work for us, we've got the internet in what we call a chat room, which you're familiar with, I'm sure, and you are too. And with all that, that's good background. You know, we got backups in case one thing goes down, we got another one.
And it's always important too, because you know, technology has come a long way since 1970. But still, looking at a radar, looking at a storm, we're all the time looking for ground truth, because the radar can't see all the way to the ground. There's a lot of times really good indication there's a tornado probably on the ground, but it's always invaluable to have a spotter out there telling you, we can listen to you guys, and we may be concerned with a storm. Verify it with you if it's putting anything down. If it's not, it's great information.
Well, I appreciate you guys listening to us on the WeatherNet too, and thank you. Have one of the ham operators, Dave Whitus, comes down to listen also, and all of this combined is what makes it safer for this area in case the storms do come and hit a certain area, that the public be aware of it and they can get to shelter, and hopefully that don't happen. But like you were saying, you can ask any weather official, the radar can only do so much. You can't see one on the ground, and that's where our spotters come in. Even though they're getting closer these days, be able to spot with the radar and say, that's it. That's got to be a tornado.
How many active spotters are there now in the Fort Smith area?
It all depends on the day and night. In the afternoon and evenings, you may have from 50 to 60, and weekends you may have 100 or more that try to check in, or if not, they're listening but not checking in. A lot of our guys, you know, if they don't have any bad weather in their area, they won't get on and report. They're there in case we're needed, and we have a bunch of our spotters that go out and check into WeatherNet right off the bat. So where do you want me to go to look for the worst area? And they head out to that area and report back.
What area are you going to cover? I suppose all the way a little bit further west and south, LaFleur County out toward Haskell County.
Yeah, usually that's where they most come, as you well know, southwest or northeast. But you never know. Sometimes they'll come out of the northwest and track the southeast too. That's why we usually have more of them headed toward the southwest. But they'll go wherever they are needed.
Before we wrap it up, what got you into weather to begin with? Was there any defining moment in your life that just made you a weather junkie?
Probably the tornado here hit Fort Smith more than anything. The damage it done. I can remember one of our spotters after it hit, and he said he was on the north side of town. He was looking back to the north. Said, "I see. It looked like there's explosions going on all over Crawford in Van Buren area." So he got in his car and headed across the bridge over there. And said when he got over, he reported back, said, "It's looked like a H-bomb hit this town." You know, and that's stuff like that really scares you, but I'm glad that there wasn't more than there was killed in that.
Yeah, it was amazing. I remember that night I was at home in west of Alma. I lived between Alma and Van Buren, and of course on the front porch, you know, with I think Austin Onek on the TV. But I remember just seeing state troopers on the interstate just flying towards Van Buren, and all the power going out and everything, and not knowing, and it was an information vacuum essentially until the power came back on, because you didn't, back then you didn't have Facebook or Twitter, and everybody still had phones with cords, you know.
Well,
so
that's another thing too. These days, the time when a tornado hits an area, the first thing it goes is the cell phones along with the electricity.
Very true.
And that it helps to have some of our guys around that can relay into different areas if need be.
Well, good.
Any
Yeah,
questions?
and again, if you're interested in becoming a certified storm spotter, February 4th,
Right,
at 8500 Street.
8400 at the old Armory building, which is now the Office of Emergency Service and the Public Safety building for Sebastian County.
Yeah, and we'll, of course, get you more information on that as it gets a little bit closer. And come early this year, because last year was
Yeah, it was
I
packed
remember
full.
we had some people standing up
Yeah,
back
all the
there.
way around the building. But
So-
this year we've prepared for the bigger area outside. If you remember where the bigger area is,
Yeah.
hopefully we can get it full too. More the merrier, because the more eyes you have out there, the better it is for everybody.
It's good stuff. Wayne Johnson, Skywarn Coordinator here in the Western Arkansas area. Wayne, thank you so much for your time
You
today
bet.
and for interviewing with us.
Thanks for having me here. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Join us back next time. Next week we'll be doing a podcast again, talking more weather.